Yeah, we're live, brother. How you doing, man?
Hey, it's less than 2 days from Alabama coming into DKR. It should be exciting. There's probably going to be 103,000 fans in that stadium come Saturday morning. I know we're excited about it. I know everybody that's watching is excited about it. It is going to take these guys that are playing on both sides of the field for the University of Texas. It's going to take energy. It's going to take doing everything they can for 4 quarters to really overcome what would you consider for the last decade a juggernaut in Alabama. Your thoughts, man, before we start the show?
Absolutely. Well, I just happened to hear CDC on with Mike Harge and Rod Babers yesterday, and he called it probably the biggest home game Texas has had in a long, long time. And I was trying to remember the LSU game, and they weren't ranked high as, of course, Alabama is currently when they came to DKR. Now, they went on to win a national championship, played them a great game, went down to a 3rd and 17 conversion by them. But like you, it's Thursday, and I'm sure folks are camping out around DKR at this point, trying to get tailgate positions because this thing is going to be explosive. And Steve Sarkisian said it yesterday. We have to play our game, right? We can't get caught up in Alabama and who they are and what they are, but we all recognize that they're the number 1 team in the country coming in here. We just need to play sound, fundamental football at, like you said, at our highest effort level possible to give ourselves a chance to compete and possibly win this football game. But I know you've done a lot of work as far as analytics and data and collection to talk their offense versus our defense, and then vice versa, our defense versus their offense. So this is going to be pretty much a data-driven show where we're going to talk about who's coming to town and then what we have in our back pocket to go against them and just let folks know where we sit. And then less than 48 hours, we're going to get after it.
Yeah, I think it's important. If you go read every preview, if you go listen to every pundit, if you go listen to everyone speak, Texas is going to get blown out of the water. I think the line is currently at 20. That's down to 3 touchdowns, right? And you got a 3 touchdown. You're a 3 touchdown underdog at home. But we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect from Alabama. We're going to go through 2 deep first, and then we'll go through some PFF numbers. Obviously, the biggest thing we're going to talk about is Bryce Young. And how you may be able to affect Bryce Young based on his Pro Football Focus numbers from last year, but also talk about where Texas needs to force his hand to throw the ball, because I think that's absolutely important as well. And then we'll talk, obviously a little bit about the pass rush and the 3-headed monster of Will Anderson, Braswell, and Dallas Turner. We'll also talk coverage and why we think that we may have an opportunity up the seams, up the middle, to take advantage of Alabama like previous teams have. And then we'll talk about some of their close wins last year and one of their losses based on PFF numbers and the averages they had going into those games versus the averages that they actually had in those games where people played them close. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and add the slides and then we'll kind of go through those numbers. All right, so for those that don't really know much about the Alabama 2 deep or what players you're actually kind of looking at, if you're focused more on Texas and not so much on Alabama, you're probably not going to know exactly what their team is made of and who their 2 deep is made of. But what you'll see here in Alabama is they brought a whole bunch of transfers in. So everybody that you're looking at in orange in their 2 deep are guys that are transfers to the program or true freshmen that were recruited in that 2021 class. So if you're looking at it, Jermaine Burton is a transfer from Georgia as their starting X. And I think if you're looking at X, Z, and H here, I think that Bill O'Brien does the same thing that Steve Sarkisian does, where any of these guys can play anywhere all over the field. So really don't look at what their spot is here, but just know that they can play all the field. Trayshawn Holden has been with the program for a while. If you're looking at it, I think he is roommates with Bryce Young. So I think he and as we go down, Cameron Latu, who's their tight end, probably has the most time with Bryce Young. And if you were to go back and look at that Utah State game last week, you can see that their timing is not at game speed. He was missing a bunch of, having if you go back and look at Quinn Ewers and what he did with Xavier Worthy on some of those overthrows, you've seen the same thing in Bryce Young last week against Utah State with his 11 incompletions. I think a bigger one is Tyler Steen, who's a left tackle that is a transfer from Vanderbilt. Kobe Prentice is a fast guy, a true freshman that's playing that H position. And then the right tackle, J.C. Latham, is also a starter this year. So both their left tackles are both starters this year. And then obviously you got Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, and Jahmyr Gibbs, a junior transfer from Georgia Tech. Do you want to add any thoughts to their offense before we move on?
Absolutely, I do. So 3 of the top 6 receivers are brand new to the program, right? You got a true freshman in Kobe Prentice, and then true transfers Burton and Harrell. So although talented, every person we're going to talk about on Alabama is supremely talented. But this group together only has 1 game against Utah State before coming in here. So I know you made a point right before we came on that although they're the number 1 team in the country and they're supremely talented, this is a new group working together. And if you talk to any Alabama folks, they'll tell you this offensive line is probably the place they worry about the most. Is their offensive line with those transfers you talked about, Steen, you talked about Latham, coming in and playing right tackle as a sophomore, his first year starting, and then Jahmyr Gibbs coming in, supremely talented transfer from Georgia Tech coming in, and the guy that you can't let outside, right? You got to 18 has to do his job, setting the edge, along with 88. Barron Sorrell has to be able to set the edge to keep Jahmyr Gibbs from being able to get outside. But the things I look at is that inexperienced receiver core, not inexperienced in years, but inexperienced working in this offense with Bryce Young. So Deshaun Jameson, Ryan Watts, they're going to have their hands full. Jalen Gilbo is going to have his hands full. But something that I see that pops is out of those 3 starting receivers, 1 is a brand new freshman and the other is a transfer and new to the program. Just my thoughts on Alabama. I look at it.
And from an offensive standpoint, and we'll get to this when we kind of break down, our offense versus their defense and their defense versus our offense, we'll talk about it. But you're talking about 103,000 fans inside the DKR at 11 o'clock in the morning. Half of them probably going to be drunk by 9:30, right? And full. So communication is a big thing. I know when they went to, I actually watched the Florida game last night. They were having a hard time with the snap count. Like they had to go to a silent count because they couldn't hear the snap count. Now you've added these new, these new transfers in, these guys that have come in. Now you're playing true freshmen. Communication has to be something they need to be concerned about when they walk in DKR on Saturday. Because I think it really can affect this offense. If they have to go to silent counts, now you're having to tap the guy next to you. It starts, false starts, and you start getting penalties, and people aren't paying attention, and so on and so forth. So I think that'll play a part with this offense as well. Then getting to the defense, probably the best side of the ball for them. You're talking about a 3-headed monster. Let's kind of start with the D end here in Tim Smith. And again, we'll get into some of their PFF numbers a little later on to the show. Byron Young or DJ Dale starting at nose tackle. I don't think he's the most talented nose tackle they have, and you're probably going to see a lot of Jaheim Otis, a true freshman, probably going to get a lot of time, a lot of play in place of Dale, number 91 there. Byron Young at defensive tackle, and then obviously Will Anderson. Will Anderson, the Heisman Trophy finalist, probably has an opportunity to win the Heisman, first defense player to win the Heisman Trophy. We just want to make sure he doesn't have a big game against us, and we'll talk about a little about that pass rush. Jalen Moody was actually going to transfer out of the program, came back to Alabama, and found himself in the starting position. Henry To'oTo'o is a transfer from Tennessee. Another guy that you have to worry about pressure is Dallas Turner. And Chris Braswell, who backs up Will Anderson. That's a 3-headed monster. And we'll talk about some of the things that Texas may be able to do to keep them on the sideline versus on the field. And then you're talking about really, when you're talking about their defensive backs, you're talking about Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's probably going to get some rotation with Eli Ricks, who's a transfer from LSU. Jordan Battle, who happens to be their strong safety, but their best coverage guy on defense. And we'll talk about that in the PFF numbers. And then Terrion Arnold and Kyrie Jackson at corner will probably rotate there. And then Brian Branch is sitting at their star position. You want to
something that pops up. Yeah, something that pops out real quick is that front seven's experience, right? So they only have one guy in the front seven that's going to be starting. That's an underclassman. That's Dallas Turner, who we know his talent is off the charts. You see a whole lot of different colors up here. Texas, if you go to our lads and you look at theirs, doesn't have a whole lot of color coding. So the color coding generally in this particular scenario means they're draftable players, like first and second round players. And there's a lot of purple on this depth chart, meaning that the folks that do this for a living believe that the guys on this depth chart are first and second round talent. I think that's what you said the purple stood for. Was first and second round talent, and then the green is third or to fourth round talent. And then if you get that aqua color, it means you're probably going the fifth, sixth, or seventh round. So just a ton of talent on Alabama, which is no surprise to any of us who've been watching college football over the last decade. The kind of talent they continue to bring in. Again, they're number one on the 247 composite blue chip ratio consistently with the likes of Georgia, and we're sixth. If that tells you anything. But yeah, all this color code means that these guys are draftable NFL players. And like I said, the experience at the front seven, they only got one underclassman who's going to be starting on Saturday that's not a junior or senior. And again, Will Anderson's in the conversation for a Heisman Trophy as a defender. So that just tells you the kind of depth. And we keep hearing Chris Braswell. Well, he's a reserve guy. He's not in that starting lineup, but you hear that three-headed monster of Anderson, Turner, and we even know about Kendrick Blackshire, the starting middle linebacker, because he played at Duncanville. And this kid as a sophomore looked like a grown man. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of him without a top on or with a tank top, but he's very impressive. And then you got Eli Ricks, who's a backup guy. I'm gonna stop gushing about Alabama's defense, but I just want to give you perspective on what these colors mean, and that means they're probable NFL players.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move from the two deep. Kind of just wanted to go through that with everyone listening tonight, so you have an idea of who's on their two deep and who may be starting and who may be backing these guys up. All right, so one of the things we wanted to talk about is obviously Bryce Young, him winning the Heisman Trophy. And when you go through PFF, it's hard to find anything negative on him at all. But when you look at his numbers, there's a couple of things that stand out here when you're talking about pass direction. Loves the ball between 0 and 10 in the middle of the field. So if you look at it here, you're talking 112 completions out of 142 pass attempts for 1,224 yards. The 14 touchdowns is a lot based on his other locations in which he threw the ball, but 135.4 NFL passer rating. And I think that 14, and me and Jeremy were talking before this, is, and Jeremy may talk a little bit about it after I'm done, but if you're looking at those 14 tackles, to me, those are within 10 yards of the red zone. He's finding guys across the middle, but at the same time, if it's not down near the red zone, you're talking about guys that are taking slants and taking them to the house after they've got the ball, so yards after catching. Again, I'm talking about this is 2021 Bryce Young. Those are really the only numbers we have to go off of. But if you're looking at places to make him throw, you're looking at the far left side and the far outside right, 20 plus yards or more. That's where you're going to see that he kind of falls off at. And you definitely want to make sure you have somebody back between the numbers plus 20 yards. He's at a 50% rate, 50% pass out of 27 balls he threw, 14 of them he completed. In between the numbers, 20 yards or more for eight touchdowns, one interception for 121.5 NFL rating.
Yeah, there's not many holes in this game. Route tree, right? Short, intermediate, and deep, right? 0 to 10 being short, 10 to 20 being the intermediate routes, and then 20 being deep balls. There's not a whole lot of holes, right? So deep right is a hole in his game. But if you look at deep middle, he's over 50% hitting those throws. So every number pops off the chart other than, like I said, that deep right. But under pressure, Clint's probably going to talk about that. That's when the numbers fall off a little bit. So it's important to get inside pass rush, like we've been talking about all summer and this fall, from the 1 and the 3. And then when you can get 88 off the edge, like he performed against Louisiana Monroe, again, you're talking about there couldn't be a higher differential in who you played last Saturday versus who you're playing this Saturday. Like the team that we beat 52-10, was picked to finish 7th out of their division, a part of the Sun Belt Conference. The team that's coming in here on Saturday is the number 1 team in the nation. But it can't limit your try, right? So you have to go every play as hard as you possibly can, put pressure and play sound defensively. And what it tells me, this chart, and I talked about to Clint before we came on, is I'm pushing everything to the edges because he's hot over the middle. 112 out of 42 short routes. He's 94 for 92 intermediate, and he's 14 for 27 right down the middle in the seam. So I'm trying to play inside shade by my corners and use the second sideline as my second defender whenever I can. I'm not trying to let anybody get across the middle without getting their hands put on them. But you got to create pressure, and I don't care where it comes from. Hopefully you can get it from your front 4. 88 can have a game. 99 can have a game. 90 can have a game. Got to put pressure on Bryce Young. You just can't let him sit back there and pick you apart, especially down the middle. Push everything to the outside if possible.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, again, it's hard to find negative numbers when you're looking at PFF numbers for Bryce Young. There's a reason he won the Heisman Trophy last year. But if you look at his under pressure numbers, you're looking at 226 dropbacks while he was under pressure, 168 attempts when he was under pressure, 80 completions at a 47.6 yard completion, or 47% completion rate. And if you look at his numbers, you're usually not going to see that. For 1,320 yards, 17 touchdowns. So obviously he's still good at throwing the ball under pressure, finding his guy and be able to throw for touchdowns. He threw 7 interceptions last year, and out of those 7 interceptions, 3 of them happened while he was under pressure. If you go back and look at his offensive numbers based on Pro Football Focus, I'm just going to kind of run some numbers down for you. So against Ole Miss, he was at right about 78.6. Texas A&M, he was at 82.3. Mississippi State, he was at 89.1. And this is total numbers, not pressure, under pressure. And then in New Mexico State, 92.5, 90.4. He actually had around an 88 grade against Georgia in the looks like the championship, college championship. So it's one of those things, like Jeremy said, got to get pressure on him, got to make him uncomfortable. He's really good at throwing off platform. He's really good at throwing really across his body when he's on the move. But I think it's important that you get pressure, interior pressure, but your guys on the outside maintain their rush lane so that you don't give him an opportunity to run if he has it, because he's going to take it. I don't think he's a run first quarterback, but he can run. He can get yards, and we got to make sure. But at the same time, we got to make sure that we're keeping him under pressure during this football game. Give ourselves an opportunity.
I think the guys that have the toughest job in this game are 70 and 78 on the offensive side, Christian Jones and Kelvin Banks, stopping that juggernaut we talked about. But I think the second probably toughest job that of any of our guys that are going to have the toughest job is 18 and 88. Again, we talked about keeping Jahmyr Gibbs inside. Don't let him get outside, setting the edge on the run. But at the same time, you can't let Bryce Young sit back there and have all day to pick you apart in the secondary. So they have a tremendous job in trying to put perimeter pressure on him in the pass game. So, again, 88, 18, and whoever comes behind them to play those in positions have their work cut out for them. They have a tough challenge, but, again, they have to fight from first snap to last snap. And I think you talked about it earlier, and I wrote it down. The responsibility of 103K. The responsibility of the 103,000 folks that are lucky enough to see the number 1 team in the country come to DKR on Saturday at 11 have to play a role in this game. They have to come loud, and they have to stay late, and they have to come early, be loud, stay late. That was Mac Brown's, slogan for the fans while he was here. I think we have to echo that slogan on Saturday. You have to affect the game. And if you somehow get down early, you can't let it affect you. Just like we're asking the team not to affect the team and to keep going, to fight through adversity, the fan base has to do the same thing on Saturday. They have to be in full throat, like you said, whether they're intoxicated by 9:30. I think you said that earlier. Whatever it takes, just be safe out there. If you do, enjoy refreshments of the alcoholic variety or the alcohol variety, but give these kids your full support for 4 hours. That's what they need from you. You got to be loud. You got to affect the game. And like Clint said, you got to make them go no huddle. You got to make them go silent snap counts. You have to, try to get them to jump whenever you can to get them behind the chains to help your football team. And this is where it's going to matter.
I think the heat index is supposed to be like at 97 degrees at 11 o'clock on Saturday morning. Heat index.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think the UV index or something like that is at 9. The highest goes at 10. So it's going to definitely be hot. Like Jeremy said, everybody needs to be safe out there if you're enjoying that. So I do have the comments up over here, and I kind of want to bring up David Williams' comment about Bryce Young is like Jason Kidd, John Stockton as a quarterback. You can't give a cushion. You can't give a cushion against him. It'll make passing too easy for him. I can't see UT sacking Young, but they can affect the Alabama receivers. I think that you can affect the Alabama receivers, and we'll get to that when we talk about our preview. I think you can affect the wide receivers of Alabama, but I also think you can affect Bryce Young. You may not get to him, but it doesn't mean you're not getting pressure. I think the pressure rate is important. Yes, you want to get sacks. He's going to put you behind the chains, but if you get pressure on him, he believe it or not, he's human. He does incomplete passes. He does. It's not like every throw that he has, every throw he has, he completes it. I promise. He does throw incomplete passes. Screen. It is. He threw 11 of them against Utah State last week. 11 incompletions out of the balls he threw. So if you get pressure on him, and we'll talk a little bit about what Utah State did to him last week in that game, it was very little. Obviously, they're being vanilla, but there were ways that you can affect him, and there's ways that you can draw up a defense to create pressure, even if you do not get him on the ground and cause losses.
Yeah, like I said, sacks are always bonus for me, right? I want that pressure rate, that havoc rate to be up. 47.6% completion percentage when he's under pressure. That's what you want. I'm going to stop real quick because you brought up a comment, so I'm going to bring up a comment real quick. It said, LOL, Jeremy giving a safety brief like it's a 4-day weekend. Well, it happened to be a 4-day weekend for the unit that I just left because of their outstanding performance at the National Training Center. I actually got promoted yesterday to captain. Pretty fired up about that.
Damn, I forgot about that. My bad.
No, it's all good, brother. So yeah, I'm not a commander yet, but I have the rank to become a commander. And yeah, alcohol-related incidents will always be a part of my safety brief. So yes, please be safe out there this Saturday. Like I said, it's going to be a blast in the build-up for that game. Everybody's there. Fox is there. ESPN is there. Game Day is there. You guys enjoy all that stuff. You folks that are going to the game, visit with all those people. Get there as early as you possibly can to see everything that Bevo Boulevard has to offer and enjoy yourselves.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to pass rush. Obviously, this is what most fans are concerned about. Christian Jones, Kelvin Banks, true freshman going against probably I'm not going to say probably the best pass rush defense they're going to see probably this year, next year, and the year after that. Obviously, there's a couple of guys up here. You're talking about Will Anderson had 540 pass rush snaps. Out of those pass rush snaps, he pass rushed 482 times at a 90% clip, 82 total pressures, 15 sacks, 11 hits, and 56 hurries, which is right at about 10.7% of the time that he actually, out of those 89 pass rush attempts, or 89% of the pass rush attempts, he affected the quarterback 10% of those times. Then you got a guy like Chris Braswell that's backing him up at edge. Obviously, his numbers were lower last year than probably what he's going to see this year. He had 75 attempts, 68 pass rush at a 90% clip. So again, these guys, when they're on the field, it's about out of the 10 snaps you have, 9 times they're going to rush the quarterback. And then you have, if you go down a little bit further, you're talking about Dallas Turner. He's going to play at the other side when Will Anderson or Chris Braswell's in there. They may have them on the field at some time together, all three of them together at some point. But you're talking about, again, somebody that's 255 attempts. He pass rushed 202 times. Total pressures 25 with 9 sacks. So his sack rate is really, really high. For the 25 total, pressures he got, 9 of those are sacks, 13 of them are hurries, and at 8.9%. You want to talk a little bit about their pass rush, Jeremy?
Yeah, we have talked about it. Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell are going to affect the game. But transitioned on our side, how many times is Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood going to feel comfortable leaving 78 and 70 out there with no help? That's the question, because you can't help them all game long. What percentage of that are you going to have Kelvin Banks going mano a mano with a defensive end, and the same thing with Christian Jones? Because you can't always have a tight end help. You can't always have Roshan or Bijan chipping. So I think you put in the notes something interesting is if you ever find yourself seeing Anderson and Braswell and or Dallas Turner on the sidelines, that's a time when you settle on your scheme, your personnel set, and you run as fast as you can in that line of scrimmage and do not allow them to substitute back in the football game. You take advantage, if you ever see those guys on the sideline, to go fast. No huddle, no substituting on our side. Keep them off the football field and take advantage of the weapons that you have. But something that you were talking about, Will Anderson, 540 pass plays, right? 482 times he pass rushed, and then he affected the play 82 times for a disruption or win percentage of 17.2. That is unbelievable for that number of snaps. Just absolutely unbelievable. So you got yourself a question that you have to ask if you're Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood is, how many times am I going to let my tackles go one-on-one with these guys? And there's got to be a percentage there that they've already probably discussed. And it's always going to be down and distance dependent, right? So if it's an obvious run play for us, you're probably not going to double team them. But if it's an obvious passing down, you're probably going to give them some help or slide them some help. But I was really encouraged by Hayden Connor. I know somebody dropped some wisdom and some numbers about the starting line and how they performed against ULM. Zero pass rush was for Banks, gave up 1 sack and a 5-yard penalty. And then after that, he was clean. Hayden Connor was clean for the whole football game. No penalties, no hurries, no nothing coming from his side. But again, I'm going to go back to Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood. Got to ask themselves how comfortable are they with leaving 78 and 70 out there one-on-one, mano a mano with these guys, because they have to at some point. There's going to be a certain snap percentage that they have to go one-on-one and take care of these guys.
Yeah. Going over to coverage, talk a little bit about, because again, honing in really on their defense side of the ball versus our offense versus their defense. We'll talk about that when we get to what we think is important for the game. Jordan Battle, strong safety, is the best coverage guy on the football field on Saturday for Alabama. They're currently at 89.7 coverage. He's in pass coverage 600 times. He was in coverage 584 of those pass snaps. He was targeted 33 times. Out of those 33 targets, he won what would be 43.4% of the time. The receiver won 57.6, which are very, very good numbers. Because when me and Jeremy look at these numbers, I think we're looking somewhere probably around 60% is what we're looking at, 60 to 65%. Out of every 10 snaps, we're looking at the receiver catching a ball on you 6.5, around 6 to 6.5% or 6.5 times. If you look at it here, you're talking, and we'll talk about another number you want to know about that's not on the screen, but talk about Brian Branch at 68.7%. 68.7 is his Pro Football Focus number. Kool-Aid McKinstry, who you're probably going to see on the field a lot next year, was their 12th best cover guy according to PFF last year at 63 times. He was targeted 27 times. That was 27 times. They caught the ball on him 51.9% or 51.9 reception rate, which is really, really good. But one of the numbers that's not on here, and I'll let Jeremy talk to this in a minute, that's not on here is from their linebacker, Henry To'oto'o. His current grade is in I believe, the lower 40s when it comes to coverage. I think that's an opportunity that Texas can take advantage of with the Jatavian Sanders or Bijan Robinson. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Jordan Battle, right? Strong safety. 89.7% coverage grade. Expect for him to draw the assignment of Jatavian Sanders all game long. That's going to be a matchup that you're going to want to watch. Is Jordan Battle versus Jatavian Sanders. And then Henry To'oTo'o, right? The worst coverage player on Alabama is probably going to draw a lot of Bijan Robinson. As many times as I can get 5 on 10 for that's an advantage Texas. Anytime I can get Bijan Robinson locked up with Henry To'oTo'o, if I see that as Quinn Ewers, I'm looking at that matchup real quick. Rod Babers has come put some Bijan on it, and I know somebody tweeted at me yesterday when he said that, because I've been asking for Bijan Robinson to get 25 touches per game. I think he got 13 last week. I think it was 11 carries and two pass receptions. I think this is a game where you see him get close to that 25 number, especially if, like I say, 10 for Alabama's responsible for covering him. You got to look his way. And then Kool-Aid McKinstry, I asked Clint, I said, well, 51.9% reception percentage against is a very good number. I kind of feel like this is a Deshaun Jameson-esque grade. So when Deshaun Jameson has a higher reception percentage against, I agree, than Kool-Aid McKinstry. But when Deshaun Jameson gets beat, they're generally for a pass completion of greater than 20 yards. So I don't know why he's graded at 63 with a, reception percentage of 51.9. But you're going to have to go at these guys. I think Battle, like I said, is going to draw the assignment of Jatavian Sanders, probably leaving Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington on one-on-one matchups that they have to win on Saturday. Those guys Jordan Whittington has to have more than one reception. He had 3 total in the game, but it took him a while to get 1. And I think this is where you're going to see 11. I think you're going to see Brennan Thompson. I think you're going to see Savion Red. I think they were kept on the sidelines against ULM to not show certain skill sets that they possess. And I think 15 probably is going to make his season debut. I think you're going to see a Jai Hall on the field as well. I think you're going to see all 6, 7 of our top receivers get playing time, especially, like I said, if you find Dallas Turner and Will Anderson on the sidelines, whoever's out there is going to continue. If Lockaby's the offensive coordinator, they're going to be left out on the sidelines for the continuation of that drive if I can help it. I'm not substituting anybody. I'm going fast break.
I kind of want to go back to Henry To'oTo'o because I think he's an opportunity you can take advantage of from Texas. Because if you're looking at his grades, I'm going to give you his total grades from last year, right? On defense, 50.3 is what he graded out total defense from PFF. Run defense, and we'll talk a little bit about what our offense should do to their defense here shortly. 58 was his grade. Tackling, just under 63 grade. Pass rush, right at 54.7, and his total coverage grade was 44.1, which really makes me want to go back to look at that Arkansas game and see what Arkansas did to him. He had a 27.7 grade against Arkansas in coverage. A total grade of 41.4 total grade on defense. In Miami, who ran the ball on them really, really well. If you didn't have an opportunity to go back and watch the Florida game, Florida did a really good job of running the ball against them. He had a 24.9 grade for run defense and a 29.3 overall grade against Florida last year on the road.
I could tell you what Henry To'oTo'o was probably responsible for against Arkansas without watching the tape, and that's KJ Jefferson. He was probably asked to spy a lot on KJ Jefferson, and KJ Jefferson has a knack of taking a shotgun snap, working his way towards the line of scrimmage, and then if that spy moves towards him, dumping the ball over his head in the backfield or right behind him in front of the safeties to get big gainers. And they got guys like Treylon Burks. They were probably running crossing routes behind the linebackers and in front of the safeties. That's what I envision Henry To'oTo'o's job was against Arkansas, was probably spying KJ Jefferson for most of the game, and then probably didn't make tackles against him in the open field if that's what his responsibilities were. But yeah, it's interesting to see what Arkansas took advantage of against the linebackers for Alabama last year.
All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about in these slides are going to be a couple of road games and then a home game there in Tuscaloosa at Florida, because I think it's important that we kind of picked out these road games with large stadiums. Obviously, one being the Swamp, the other one being Kyle Field there in College Station, where Florida was a 2-point conversion into that game in about 2 minutes from tying that game up. Believe it or not, this is something that Texas can learn from. Alabama was up 21-3 going in at halftime. 21-3. So at the half, you're talking about Alabama got outscored 26-10 in the second half of that football game. The crowd took over. Bryce Young and that offense were making mistake after mistake after mistake because they couldn't hear. They had to go to a silent count. And I think at one point they went probably 3 or 4 3 and outs. And again, you're talking about a more talented, to me, more talented offensive team that they currently have this year. So I think, again, the crowd has to be in it. But if you're looking at the grades, some of these grades don't really mirror what they did. And I think a couple of things to really call out here, really not on the offensive side of the ball, but on the defensive side of the ball. Run, or really offense and defense. You're talking about run blocking at 50 against Florida, 53.3. Defense had a 55.2 grade. Tackling, they had a 58 grade. Alabama usually has sure tacklers. Again, Florida put them in space in that game, made them tackle them in space, had a 58 grade in tackling. And then their pass coverage, again, I think it's Emory Jones was their starting quarterback last year because the now quarterback was injured in that game, didn't play. But you're talking about a pass rush of 63.3. Those linemen, to include one that transferred from the University of Texas in, DeLance, from the University of Texas. They really played those Alabama defensive linemen really well last year. Then you're going to the Texas A&M game. Same thing. If you look at those same numbers down here, 51.2 on defense, 62 run defense, 55.4 in tackling. They were missing tackles in space. It's not like that Jimbo Fisher's down there, east of us playing, spreading the ball out over the field. His antiquated offense. Tackling was 55.4, and then the pass rush was 61.4. And what I think what's important to take away from this is that same Texas A&M team last year. I get disgusted talking about them, but they had two true freshmen that were playing on their offensive line at the same time they were playing Alabama last year. And then somebody was talking about special teams earlier, and they think the one thing that we have over them is our special teams, our special teams, and I absolutely agree with that. And then at LSU at home, one of the things that stick out is that 61.4 rush grade. You keep them in the 60 pass rush grade. I think if Texas can do that, they have an opportunity to get the ball out to the receivers. And then 66.3 coverage. You want to add? I know you looked at these numbers earlier and may want to add something to them.
Just the A&M, the coverage of 40.6. We know that, like you said, Jimbo's offense isn't the most imaginative offense, but they had a hell of a tight end in Weidermeyer that probably ate the Alabama linebackers up. Again, I didn't go back and watch A&M versus Alabama last year, but just by looking at these numbers and understanding Jimbo Fisher's offense and Alabama's inability to cover in the linebacking core makes me think that tight ends, running backs, because we know A&M does have a pretty good plethora of running backs that are pretty decent. And with Spiller and Aeneas Smith and those guys that was there last year. And then the tight end Weidermeyer makes me think they took advantage of their linebackers' inability to cover. And that's how they put up 41 points on Alabama. And again, like you said, their ability to get a pass rush, 61%, 63%, and 61%. If we can negate that and give Quinn Ewers time to get the ball out to his weapons. And again, I think the short passing game is an extension of the running game. It's going to be a focus of Steve Sarkisian's. Get the ball out of his hands. Don't take negative plays. Don't hold the ball too long. That puts you in position to take holding penalties. I think that's a recipe for success that we have to utilize in order to make this thing a game, because I think it's possible. And then, like I say, the later you get in it, then the belief in the players, belief in the fans. Again, one of the Army mottos, and we're both military men, is I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. And they have to go in the football game thinking that I will not accept defeat and I will not quit. I'll give 100% effort. I'll be sound fundamentally and be ready to give Alabama everything we have from kickoff to closing whistle.
Yeah, I just want to give those two offensive lines at Texas A&M credit. Those two freshmen. One was Ruben Feathery, and the other was Bryce Foster. And Ruben Feathery held his own in that football game. You go back and watch it. Held his own the entire game. So it's not like he can't be done.
And Bryce Foster is a teammate of Hayden Connor at Katy Taylor, right? And like I said, he didn't start as a true freshman, but he came on as a true freshman, and then started right away his sophomore year. And again, he didn't give up anything last week to University of Louisiana Monroe. The kid we've had on the program, my wife's favorite player on the football team. So I'm always going to shout him out when I get a chance. But yeah, he played really, really, really well last week against ULM. Let's hope that continues against Alabama. Let me switch now that we took that down and actually face the camera.
All right.
We're back, dude. That's a lot of data.
It is a lot of data, but I think it's important to go through it and kind of explain what we're going to explain now. Obviously, kickoff, 12 Eastern, 11 Central. Alabama's coming to Texas, DKR. If you have not hit that like button, this is an exciting week. It's hard to get work done. I actually did a honey-do list. I came home, changed, went and mowed the grass, like as soon as I got home, because I didn't want the honey-do list for the next couple of days. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's all Texas and homework. So a couple of things, man, when you're looking at Alabama, if you look at any upset against really the Crimson Tide in the safe narrative, more often than not, you'll see a successful quarterback who was able to make throws in tight windows and dissect Alabama secondary. That's one of the things that Texas needs to do on Saturday. Quinn Ewers needs to show he's uber talented, he's elite in from tight end all the way to Xavier Worthy and in between. We need to make sure that we're trying to the best we can with the pass rusher we're going to see, try to dissect that secondary as best as possible. The other thing is taking advantage of turnovers is one of the bigger things, take advantage of turnovers. And y'all talked about special teams in the comments earlier. I've seen them, didn't want to ignore them. But I think it goes vice versa. I think if Alabama gets down to the red zone and they're able to keep Alabama out of the red zone or out of the from scoring a touchdown versus scoring a field goal, I think it'll go a long ways to the score on Saturday night. So.
Yeah. So you talked about dissecting the secondary, right? And tight window throws. I don't want to have to throw a lot of tight window throws. Again, I'm going to dump the ball down to 5. I'm going to try to hit 8 over the middle with in crossing routes. I'm going to work 4 when it's zone coverage. I'm going to try to work 4 across the middle. Jordan Whittington, David Williams said it. I'm going to say it. Jordan Battles locked up on Jatavian Sanders. 11 and 8 have to win their matchups. Like you have to extend the field vertically as much as you do horizontally. And I know Miss Bonnie's in here. She told me she's going to be here tonight. Brendan's mom. They have to take advantage of that 10-2 speed, stretch the field. Where they hit it or not, they have to make Alabama think about it. And they have to do the same thing with Xavier Worthy. If you get one-on-one matchups on the perimeter, you have to win those matchups. But I'm giving a whole lot of 5. I've heard folks say, you're going to pass the ball in order to step the run. I think that's accurate. But I think the kind of play style that you're going to have to utilize is, like I said, that quick RPO, get the ball, things that he did phenomenal against ULM. RPO, pull it out of Bijan's belly, quick flick of the wrist out to Jatavian Sanders, quick flick of the wrist out there to Casey Kane, and let Casey Kane bust a tackle and work his way down the sidelines. You just can't hold on the ball too long, or those guys, Anderson, Turner, and the folks that we've been talking about are going to be in your back pocket. And like I said, it all goes to how many times is Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian going to be comfortable with leaving Kelvin Banks and Christian Jones out there one-on-one against these defensive ends, and how are they going to utilize Roschon, Bijan, and the tight ends? Big 92, Andre Carrick. Are they going to put that tight end jersey on him and have him as a 6th offensive lineman in some formations? I do anticipate we will see that as well.
Yeah. So let's talk our defense versus their offense first. Again, went back and watched the Utah State game. I think when I was still in Orlando, Florida, I watched that game. I've watched a lot of film. about Alabama. And they threw out an exotic package called the Prowler package. Where they didn't have anybody really down. It was 6 guys standing up at the line, in a 2-point stance. And believe it or not, it actually confused Bryce Young multiple times there. I think Texas needs to bring some exotic packages. I think they need to stick with their understand techniques. At some point in the game, they need to bring exotic packages to confuse Bryce Young. Your thoughts on that?
No, 100%. Like we've talked about it, is the offensive line is inexperienced. You need to bring, again, this game means nothing in the grand scheme of Texas totality and being where they want to be on December 3rd. Sarkis said that 3 or 4 times this week, and I agree with him. Like if the Big 12 championship is your goal, this game has absolutely no effect on it. But I will say this. You have to pull out every card to try to beat Alabama, and that's one of those things that I believe will benefit you is standing your linebackers up, getting the fastest team on the football field that you possibly can. We talk about Byron Murphy and Vernon Broughton's quickness in the interior. We talk about, Barron Sorrell's speed off the edge. We talk about, the linebackers and how fast Jalen Ford is and DeMarvion Overshown off the other edge. Put guys out there that have speed that can get to the quarterback quickly, because I think they're going to try to do the same thing. I think Bryce Young's going to try to get the ball out of his hands as quick as he possibly can. And I think showing him different looks, again, is it 3-down lineman? Is it 4-down lineman? Is it 6 guys standing up with nobody's hand on the ground to try to confuse him? If it worked for Utah State, it's more than likely going to work for us, or they've been preparing for it, that we're going to utilize it this week. So I think you might see that. I definitely think you might see that if it worked against them last week. I think you definitely roll it out, because I think we have the kind of athletes, the speed at the linebacking core and at the edge position to be able to utilize something like that.
Yeah, so when you're looking at a couple of other things in that game, they were able to get penetration inside, shooting gaps. And people go back and say, well, it's vanilla. Alabama was vanilla. But no offensive lineman ever wants to get beat by a defensive lineman, regardless of how vanilla it is. So I think we have an opportunity with Keandre Coburn. Again, this offensive line is something that Alabama fans will tell you. Most people will tell you that they're probably concerned about the most. And then when you're looking at us on the defense side, people believe that our front is probably the best side of the ball with the depth that it has. And Alfred Collins sound like he's coming back. But I think we have an opportunity to eat on the defensive side of the ball with our defensive linemen this week, not just getting pressure, but also stopping the run. I think the biggest thing when you're talking about stopping the run with a guy like Gibbs and Chase, I think Chase McClellan, dude's huge, by the way, doesn't go down easy. So they're going to have to gang tackle McClellan. But with a guy like Gibbs, he's very elusive. He's able to cut. I think the biggest thing with him is don't let him turn inside runs into outside runs. They need to make sure that they're keeping the edge on those runs, keeping them inside and allowing, 93, 95, 99, 98, and 90 to go to work on the inside, because I think that is an opportunity that Texas has.
I got one thought, because you said folks think that our defensive line is deep, is any position we have on the football field. And I don't want to mince your words, but Josh Pate said something very profound this week, and I took it. And he said, game 1 is for observations, not assumptions, right? So we played University of Louisiana Monroe, and our defensive line went off, right? So we observed them making plays. And somebody said, Dan Quinn said this, I'm a better seer than I am a hearer, right? I like to see you produce versus hearing you going to do something. So yes, against University of Louisiana Monroe, the defense showed out. My breakout play of the year got 1.5 sacks. I felt like it got 2. But one game against the University of Louisiana Monroe doesn't make our defensive line, that much better than what we thought they were coming into the season. We observed them against a team that was picked 7th in their division out of the Sun Belt make plays. That thing has to carry over. We have to see that against a team like Alabama. And again, there's no in between the team we played on Saturday and the team we're going to. There's no like ladder. You went from a team that's picked 7th in the division in the Sun Belt to the number 1 team in the country. There was nobody in between there. But I would say, yes, their line is very inexperienced. We need to take advantage of the talent that we have on our defensive line, but we don't know that it's that much improved. We observed them make plays against University of Louisiana Monroe. Let's see how they play against Alabama. And I think it's somewhere in the middle of how they performed last year and how well they played last week. You know what I mean?
I agree to a certain extent, based on their numbers last year against what they had against Rice was much better against ULM than it was against Rice. The speed was different. I think they looked different. Keandre Coburn running to the sideline wasn't a thing last year. Defensive line took off last year. So what I observed today or on Saturday was much different from a defensive standpoint, just based on the energy level in which they played with. Now, I'll give you that. Now, can they play with it consistently week in and week out? Absolutely. I did observe that. And they need to stay. They need to play with that same fanatical energy this week against Alabama. I just think it's an opportunity against Alabama's offensive line to be able to, if they play at that same level that they played, they actually got to play at a higher level, right, than ULM. But you're also playing Utah State versus, which was a good team last year that won 11 games, playing Alabama, and I think that opportunity's there.
And I did say all those things post game that you could definitely see the hustle, the hats around the ball, everything they talked about in the fall that they wanted to do, they definitely executed. What I'm saying is that we observed it, right? I need to see, just like you just said, I need to see the same things we did last week manifest this week, but you got a much bigger, much better opponent coming in. And like I said,
absolutely.
I would have loved to had a conference game litmus test. And again, teams improve, units improve more from their first to second game more than they're going to improve the rest of the time this year. You're going to see the most improvement between game 1 and game 2. How's it going to manifest against the number 1 team in the country? We're going to see it at 11 o'clock on Saturday. And I wasn't just poo-pooing on them. I was just saying that they're probably somewhere in the middle of how they performed last year and how they performed. Now, if they could take that another leap, better than they did last week, and we see, because we talked about who played really, really well, who graded out really well, and who didn't. Can those guys who didn't grade out really, really well, and again, we played 78 guys. And we played 78 guys against University of Louisiana Monroe. Most of the starters were taken off midway through the third quarter, similar to what Alabama did against Utah State. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they play over 4 quarters with those guys who were pulled off the field last week and replaced, systematically throughout the game, because the game is never in doubt. What this true rotation looks like, especially against the number 1 team in the country.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, man. Couldn't agree more. I think it's important. It's like at this particular point, me and you kind of got rid of the burnt orange glasses this year, right? We've kind of done that, and said, hey, the proof is in the pudding. Let me see it. Seeing it at ULM, obviously got to step, have A++ game against Alabama to do what they get against ULM. We just got to see it. All right. So this is, again, you're going against the number 1 team in the country. Everybody expects them to win a national championship. 20-point underdog at home. Everybody says you're going to get blown out. But there's going to be 11 guys on the offense side of the ball, 11 guys on the defense side of the ball. It really comes down to who executes better on Saturday, right? I think the 3 go hand in hand together. I'm about to talk about, other than Latu and I think their slot receiver. He's working with brand new wide receivers. You've seen that last week. Kind of went back to what Quinn looked like with Xavier Worthy, kind of overthrowing him on those long balls. You've seen the same thing with Bryce Young last week. Working with 2 offensive tackles, new offensive tackles, transfer from Vanderbilt. So I think it's important. You're talking about a team that's coming on the road for the first time, who had problems last year on the road and with large crowds, that you challenge these wide receivers at the line to skew their timing even more than they had last week. Your thoughts on those 4 combined thoughts there? No,
everything that I'm going to start with the back half first, right? We talked about the inexperience at their receiver core other than Latu and how we need to take advantage of that. We talked about last post-game show, the physicality of Jalen Gilbo and Ryan Watts and how we need to utilize that physicality against everybody. not just Alabama. So I agree with you. I think we inside shade with the corners and push everything to the sidelines because we saw Bryce Young's pass chart and what he's good at and what he's not. And we use our physicality with those guys to push them towards the sideline and make him make those throws. Try to limit anything coming across the field. And again, I think that's where the speed and the coverage ability of DeMarvion Overshown, you might see him drop back in zone coverage a little bit more, or he may be responsible for covering Gibbs out of the backfield more. If you can create pass rush from other places other than zero. Now, he's going to get his fair share of snaps as a rush in, and he should, because we've seen his ability on that goal line stop to beat an offensive tackle and get in the backfield and take quarterbacks down to the ground. It's going to be crazy. Like Pete Witkowski and Gary Patterson, Steve Sarkisian said they had this game plan in 3 months ago. I'm sure they tweaked it a little bit based upon what they saw Alabama do, and I'm sure Alabama did the same thing based upon what they saw last week against ULM. But I think you hit the nail on the head. You have to be physical with their wide receivers as much as you possibly can to throw off the time. You just can't allow him to sit back there and get comfortable and be in sync with their outside guys.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of Roll Tide in here tonight, man. We appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Obviously, subscribe to the channel if you're commenting. So we appreciate that. Make sure you hit that like button in there as well, man. We're excited for this football game. I know it's a tall task for our Texas Longhorns against your Alabama Crimson Tide there. But we'll see what happens on Saturday there in DKR. But also excited to be joining you on the SEC here in a few short years. Definitely excited about that, man. And we'll kind of see where it goes based on this game. Obviously, this game is not going to be the end all of our season. Trying to make it to that Big 12 championship there in Dallas on December 3rd is what our goals are. But would love to keep this game close, if not win it in the fourth quarter. And there's always a possibility for that. Moving over to the defense side of the ball, obviously, or offense side of the ball, our offense versus Alabama's defense. Number one on this list is to minimize. I think you got something there, Jeremy, right?
Yeah, I'm pulling up my little banner.
Banner you made today. Awesome. Our offense versus Texas offense versus Alabama defense. First and foremost, want to minimize the pass rush, right? And don't put yourself behind the chains. That's when you're going to put yourself in trouble, and that's when you're going to see Dallas Turner and Braswell and Will Anderson tee off and try to get your quarterback.
Wholeheartedly. I mean, I've talked about pretty much all this stuff leading up to this segment, but you have to minimize the pass rush. How are you going to do it? Because like I said, you're going to be forced at some facet of the game or some point in the game to leave your tackles one-on-one with their defensive ends. Can our offensive tackles hold up? Again, we talked about Otis in the middle. He's a monster, 360 pounds. He's a freshman. But I feel pretty good about Hayden Connor and Cole Hudson's ability to keep pressure, and Jake Majors to keep pressure out of the middle. I worry about the strength of their team, and that's the defensive ends one-on-one with our tackles. Again, we got a true freshman out there who was the 26th ranked offensive tackle in all of college football last week as far as PFF grades, so graded really high. Christian Jones, again, is a veteran, has started. This is, I think, his third year starting, for the University of Texas. How many times are we willing to leave those offensive tackles one-on-one with these defensive ends? And then, again, David said it a little bit earlier. We flew past it, but he's got the same idea that I do. In some points of the game, you're going to let Dallas Turner and Will Anderson come upfield, and then you're going to try to have to sneak five behind them. I think another way to slow down their pass rush is to screen behind them. Let them come and dump it over. That way they're cognizant of it. If you could chop them on occasion, you got to do that. But then you just got to be ready for whatever they do as far as their counter. I think Kelvin Banks and Christian Jones can set and take care of the outside rush most times. It's when they set too deep, and what kind of spin moves do these defensive ends utilize to get back inside to put pressure on the quarterback, and are our guards able to then step out and put a right hand or a left hand on them to slow that pass rush down. And if they beat them all, then 5 has to step up, 2 has to step up, 7 has to step up and take them on.
Yeah.
But again, I think we're going to be schemed to be able to stop the pass rush. Can we be able to, will we be able to do it with our talent? I think we're going to be schemed to stop them. Can we stop them mano a mano, one-on-one is the question.
Yeah, and it goes back to personnel, right? How many tight ends you're going to play? Andre Carrick actually put number 90, some 90 number on last week and came in as a jumbo tight end. Are you going to play 12 personnel? Or are you going to have, are you going to, 21 personnel with 2 running backs? Maybe one may chip, the other one run the ball. However they're going to do that. I think it's really going to be based on, what formations they're in and or how they're really going to handle these guys. I think you see a lot of Tom Herman special this week as well. And people may know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Tom Herman special, and that's really getting the ball out to these wide receivers on the edge as an extension of the run game. I think that's going to be important because, again, you're talking about probably 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds is all the time you're probably going to have to get the ball out of your hand, probably closer to the 2 second than the 3 second. So I think you have to take advantage of that with Xavier Worthy, Casey Kane, like you did last week against ULM, and that's used the short passing game as an extension of the run game. Because if you go back and look at the way that Jordan Whittington was able to block, some of these wide receivers were able to block. I think you can take that, get you a couple of yards, man. It's better to be, 2nd and 6 versus or 2nd and 7 versus, 2nd and 9. So I think you use the extension of the pass game as part of your run game. Your thoughts on that?
And we haven't really talked about him, but I think your best short to intermediate receiver is probably Jordan Whittington. He's the guy that can seem to get open in short sets. Again, Worthy's a hell of a route runner. Like he can get open against anybody, but they generally use him intermediate to deep. I think they're going to use 4 and 0 Jatavian Sanders, especially if they can get him on one of those linebackers in those short intermediate. Like you said, get the ball out of his hands to 4-0, and then again use 11, 8 for those deep shots. Use 88 for his size whenever you can. And again, we don't know what impact number 15, Ajay Hall, is going to have on this game, but I would expect to see him suited up and probably get some run in some areas. And again, the key thing for me is if you ever at a time see Dallas Turner and Will Anderson on the sidelines, regardless of the personnel package that you have on the football field, you go fast break. I would love to see fast break offense. Again, Alabama historically hasn't done really well against teams that don't allow them to utilize all of their front 7 assets and be able to rotate in and out. If there's ever a time when we have the ability to go fast, we need to utilize that, especially if it's a personnel package that Steve Sarkisian, Kyle Flood, and Quinn Ewers really like to utilize. Go fast.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're talking short to middle of the field is something that Alabama has a hard time with. If you go back and look at Georgia, you go back and look at number 9 at Florida last year. I think his last name was Gamble, if I'm not mistaken. I may have messed that up, and I apologize. But he had a field day. I think he had 9 receptions against Alabama. And I think when you listen to Saban talk this week in his one of his press conferences, he said it's one of the most difficult things on the defensive side of the ball is to be able to cover the running back out of the field and the tight end because they're just mismatches based on the people that you have out there. Usually the safeties. If you put a tight end on the safety, there's a good chance they'll body him up and they'll catch the ball. If you put a linebacker on a running back, they're faster, more athletic than those linebackers, and it's easy for them to get in space and get around them. But I think Jatavian Sanders opens up the offense with his ability to be able to get down the seams. Because now you're taking a safety out of the box to have to worry about the seams and Jatavian Sanders coming on a late release and going up the field. Now you put your safety and taking the safety out of the box. I think Jatavian Sanders, the way that he played last week, gave Texas an opportunity to open up the playbook to have to cause the safety and have to stay back versus bringing an extra safety in the box to have to worry about Bijan Robinson. Your thoughts?
I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's one of the matchups I'm going to be watching is Jordan Battle against Jatavian Sanders. If Jatavian Sanders can win matchups with Battle in the middle of the field, We know about his athletic ability. You know, if he catches the football, he could do great things with it. He's a 5-star talent for a reason. He wanted to play tight end. He wants to score touchdowns. He wants to make plays. So that is 100%. It's a threat. I guarantee you, Pete Golding and Nick Saban are putting in as many schemes as they possibly can to stop Jatavian Sanders. Again, 5-0 in the middle of the field, and then they got to worry about 8, 11, 4 on the perimeter. And they're going to scheme, depending upon down and distance, to stop that. Because they know what we want to – I feel like they know what we want to do on first and second down, again, to get ahead of the chains. It's can they execute. And, again, 0 and 5 are those guys that I think we're going to utilize in that short intermediate passing game to move the sticks.
Hey, G-Bama boy, this guy's talking about last year. Absolutely, that's the tape we have to go off of versus Utah State last week. Really not going to go off of that. And I think what you're talking about is – I think you're talking to me, and maybe you're not, but I'll clear it up, is that Alabama, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, Alabama's always had a hard time with tight ends. And prove me wrong with that, please, because it's just the way it's been. So regardless if it's last year or this year, you have the same defensive guys back on the field this year that are going to be covering the tight end as you did last year. All right, into that. Thank you, G-Bama boy, for joining the show.
He left. He left. Hang on, before you move on. It's 1 hour and 6 minutes in this show. There's 110 folks in here. I'm going to promote the show because I'm going to tell our guys what we have this weekend coming up. 112 folks in here. There's only 74 likes. So if you wouldn't mind, please hit that like button. Here it moves us up in the YouTube algorithm. We'd like to. Clint did a lot of work on this show, pulling data from just about everywhere to talk offense and defense, Alabama versus Texas. So please. Hit that like button so that folks who didn't attend the live can have an opportunity to see it a little bit later. If you are a Texas fan or Alabama fan and you haven't subscribed to Texas Football Talk, please do that. We'd really appreciate you becoming part of our family. And then for this weekend's content, on Saturday, kickoff is at 11, so we will open up the in-game chat for Inner Circle members at I almost said 09, like military, at 9 o'clock in the morning. And again, that'll be an interactive chat with myself and Clint. During the game, I'll be on, like I said, starting at 9, kickoff's at 11. He'll join us somewhere in there. So please, Inner Circle members, join us for the in-game chat. And then approximately 15 minutes after the conclusion of the game, we will come on and do our Texas Football Talk live post-game show to talk about Alabama and Texas. So thank you for hitting that like button. Thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't become an Inner Circle member and you would like to, please tap on that join button or get with us on our social media outlets after the show. And we'll be more than happy to tell you where to go to get that access.
Last thing we're going to talk about before we, I want you to get this in your brain now. So I'm going to say it before you give your final score. We're going to stay away from yards and all those things, sacks and all that stuff this week. But we're going to predict final score. Okay. We don't have a defeatist attitude ever on this channel. And I want my Horns to go out there and kick their ass, but then there's reality, right? Reality is the number one team's coming into your home this week, and you got to play an A-plus game this week to give yourself a win with no mistakes, no turnovers, and so on and so forth. And probably have to score 1 or 2 defense or special teams touchdowns to help yourself out as well. Last thing we'll talk about is Bijan and Roschon inside zone run. So last week we saw a lot of 21 personnel with Keelan and Bijan Robinson out there on the field together, and that may be something that they're have plans for. They got some plays that they didn't show last week, but just give Alabama an idea. You're going to see Keelan and Bijan versus Roschon and Bijan. And Bama guy wouldn't have liked this either because I'm going to talk about last year and Bama's inability to stop the inside zone run versus the outside. Now, I'm going to say inability. I'm going to say it's harder for them to stop the inside zone run versus the outside because of their athletic ability and speed and who they have sitting at their star position and their safeties being able to come down to the box because they're playing you man-to-man the entire game. That's what they're going to play you is man-to-man. So these receivers are going to have to beat their man. I think Texas, in order to be successful in the run game this weekend, we have to get the interior guys, Cole Hudson, Hayden Connor, and Jake Majors to be able to move those big defensive tackles out of the way to include their nose tackle and be able to run inside versus outside this week. Your thoughts, man, on the run game?
No, I agree with you. But again, it's going to be hard to run the ball inside against 360 pounds. And again, they are that size because they want to funnel the ball out to their playmakers. It's going to be difficult. Now, I think we have to be I think we have to allow them to rush upfield sometimes just to get the ball behind them on screen plays. And I think that's why we're saying the short passing game has to be an extension of the run game, because I just don't know how we can. Now, we will at times be able to open up holes, consistently open up holes for Bijan in the middle of the football field. I think what you have to do is let the guys from the end come upfield, push them outside, and then use the guards to then push the 1 and the 3 inside. I think that's your best chance to get that inside zone running game working. But to ask those guys, those 3, to stop a stalemate with 365-pound athletes is going to be difficult. I'm not saying it can't be done. They're just going to have to think outside the box. They're going to have to be innovative on ways to open up those holes. And I think you may see, and our guards are very athletic, so you may see a lot of pulls. You may see, like I said, 92 come in the game and do, they may utilize trap blocks. Let the defensive tackles come upfield and then trap them on the other side. I think it's going to be very, very versatile in the inside run game. Kyle Flood gets paid a lot of money. He's one of the best our offensive line coaches in the country. Him and Steve Sarkisian, I think they're going to scheme it up. It's, can we execute it is the question. I think they're going to give themselves the opportunity to run the football against Alabama. It's, can we execute? That's what it comes down to.
We have to run the ball. It's what's going to set up the flash and pass, which, Steve Sarkisian wants to do. That's the end all for Steve Sarkisian, is to be able to set up flash and pass and go deep over the top. And that really starts with the run, with run the ball. So we'll see what they pull out. Steve Sarkisian knows Petey Golden pretty well. That's what they call him, Petey. Pete Golding pretty well, and Nick Saban. He understands what their tendencies are, but they also understand what Sarkisian's tendencies are on the offensive side of the ball. That's why it's good, to get a guy like Gary Patterson to come in and look at your defense and offense side of the ball and do self-scouting to kind of tell you what you need to work on the defense side of the ball and the offense side of the ball. And he's been working on it for about 3 or 4 months, probably longer than that. When they found he was coming out University of Texas, they say your first task on your to-do list is start looking at Alabama tape and tell us, tell us what we need to do, give us best shot to win.
100%.
Your prediction score. Let me go first. You want to go first?
It doesn't matter. I got Alabama. Go ahead.
I'm gonna go first. I think it's a tall task for our Longhorns this weekend. Number 1 team coming to your house. I think Steve Sarkisian's going to have some success I just don't think you're going to have enough success to keep up with Alabama. I got Alabama scoring 42 to your 28 this week. So I got Alabama 42-28, not covering. Texas plays with attitude, energy. They show what they have for the rest of the season. Again, this is not the end all be all, but I got Alabama 42-28 this week. And one of those touchdowns could go either way to make it even closer.
Yeah, I'm Alabama 38, Texas 28. I don't have field goals in my equation for Texas. I don't think they trust the kicking unit enough to go for any field goals. And when we're on the plus side of our territory, I think we're going for it most times, unless it's like third and forever. I think it's Alabama 38-28, but I think it's a fourth quarter game. I think coming out of the half, we got a real chance to play with these guys and possibly, again, that's why I think the 103,000 are critical. I think if you're in a game coming out of the half or to start the fourth quarter, those guys can be the difference. Again, a false start penalty, having to go silent. If Steve Sarkisian could somehow keep their defense on the football field by going fast, just I think it's going to be close enough to where we're going to look back, regardless of who wins, and be like, hey, there might be some what ifs. And again, the two things that you don't want to question coming out and that we don't want to be talking about on the post-game show on Saturday is undisciplined. Try, right? We want them to 100% effort. We want to be disciplined and assignment sound. And then whatever happens after that. Again, this is probably we're burnt orange glasses guys. This is probably only the second time. We've probably done 20 pregame shows, and it's probably the second time I've picked against Texas, and it kind of hurts to do it. But I think our guys will be in the football game, and they're going to make a good account for themselves either way this thing turns out. And I would love nothing more than be talking about a Texas win around 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm hoping I'm wrong as hell on Saturday at about 3 o'clock. I hope I'm wrong.
I won't eat crow
altogether.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. But I hope I'm wrong as hell. But yeah, I think Saban is 43 and I think he's 43-1 when scoring first. Saban is 43-1 when scoring first. I think that's what I saw. Do you, and those may have changed, and I apologize, but would you take the ball first or play defense first, knowing that statistic?
What would I do? I'd take the ball. What I think he's going to do, I think he's going to defer. Because, again, defense gets your fans riled up, right? If you're on defense first, then they're full throat to start the game. If you're on offense, they're a little – unless you bust a big one, they're pretty subdued. They're asked to be subdued, right?
Xavier
So you want the – yeah. I mean, I'm taking the ball first, or I'm taking the ball first. But I think again, I'd be talking out of both sides of my mouth because I want the defense. I want the crowd to be raring from go, and I think the side of the ball that could get the crowd the most engaged and fired up is playing defense.
Yeah. All right, man. Good show.
I loved it, dude.
Good show, man.
Loved
Congratulations on your promotion to captain.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. So the next time we'll be talking, we'll be. For most folks, it'll be post game. For our inner circle members, it'll be in game. That's the next time we'll be coming to you. We would have played the number one team in the country. Let's see how it ends up. I'm excited, dude. I'm not sure I'm going to get much sleep between now and Saturday. Hell, I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning for ULM, so we'll see what time I get up for an 11 o'clock kick.
Work or sleep. Yeah, I know you're on vacation. For the guys out here going to work, I'm imagining people aren't getting much work done this week. With all the content that's coming out and just trying to read every story that's coming out. I know that's what I've been doing. I'm working, boss, I promise you. But I'm listening to shows as I'm working. If you're watching this show, which I highly doubt. But we appreciate y'all listening as always. We will see you on Saturday. So have a wonderful rest of your Thursday into Friday. We'll see you on Saturday. You can find us on Facebook at Texas Football Talk, on Instagram at Texas Football Talk, and on Twitter at TX Football Talk. Hook 'em.